That going. Make
Are you
sure I can
turn?
see
Are
people's
you literally turning
comments.
on the internet?
I'm literally flipping the switches as we go. The old style switches that you actually flip up.
I just think of that classic dial from Star Wars where it's like,
Yep,
boom.
exactly. So Victoria's in the house. Hey, Victoria, how's it going? And let's see. I think we are live everywhere. Welcome everyone to InDesign Tuesday. I'm joined with my special guest, Mark Heaps, and we're going to be talking about, actually mostly Mark, but we're going to be talking about uh, designing presentations using Adobe tools. And when people think presentations, especially slides, they probably think either PowerPoint or Keynote
Hmm.
or both. But we're going to talk about some things that you might not have thought about. We're going to talk about some ways of doing things that you might not have thought about. So,
Yeah.
Mark, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Appreciate
Tell me,
being here.
tell everyone. I know most people know you, but tell everyone that doesn't know you who you are, what you do, and why you're here.
Oh my gosh, all the nerd
All the
stuff.
above. Yep.
So like it says on the screen, name is Mark Heaps. I feel like I always, whenever I get asked this question, I feel like I'm at an AA meeting. I'm like, I've been addicted to Adobe for 26 years. Um, yeah, no, I live down in Austin, Texas, but I actually used to have a house about a mile away from the Adobe headquarters in San Jose, and so I've been working with Adobe tools for around about 26 years. And now my wife and I own a communications agency down in Austin, Texas. And over the years, transitioned from being a graphic design focused service group, I guess, to now we have really spent the majority of the last decade designing presentations for people. That's kind of become our bread and butter. So, like you mentioned early on, whether that's PowerPoint or Keynote. Now the big ask from a lot of clients is Google Slides. That's come into the market
Oh
quite
yeah, I can
heavily.
see that because of
Um,
the sharing aspect.
the sharing aspect, yeah, we actually gave some feedback to the InDesign team about that, saying, hey, if you could just take these few things and do that. But we
Right.
also do get, asked from clients about designing presentations in InDesign, especially if it's a marketing team that already has collateral and assets that they've already built, whether it's for their print campaign or their banners for an event. They've already done a lot of the styling and the work, right? So being able to transition now with InDesign into presentations is a new field that is growing pretty rapidly as well. So outside of that, I'm also a photographer and just professional creative. I think when you've been doing it this long, I don't really feel like I fall into a bucket. I just try to solve problems with these tools.
Cool. And while you were saying all that, I was thinking about some things that probably have made your business and your life a little easier from the standpoint of when you think about designing presentations, it's really just like designing any other kind of project. Things like colors are important, imagery is important, fonts are important. Those are the kinds of things that come into mind when I think about design.
Mm-hmm.
And more importantly than not, if you're going to sit through a slide presentation, unless that information is extremely compelling,
Mm-hmm.
you're really looking at the visuals most of the time. So the visuals have to be compelling, even if the content isn't. And we
Yeah.
have all sat through presentations that made us just want to kill ourselves
what,
because,
what was Seth Godin's old quote? Bullets kill.
yeah, but exactly. Bullet point means kill the presenter or bullet to the
Yeah.
presenter. Exactly.
Yep.
Because, just so many bad things go on in old school presentations that from people that aren't designers because
Yeah,
they open up a
absolutely.
template and they just start typing things in.
Well, and all the old cliches too, right? So certainly design fundamentals is a core part of building successful designs. But I remember when I started really diving into the world of presentation design, I worked at an agency called Duarte in Silicon Valley, which all they focus on is presentations. And what I would have considered was a successful career as a designer, having been at Apple and other big corporations. I went in there and I tell everybody I really failed out of the gate because I had the design fundamentals. I didn't understand the application for this media. And so, you might understand, for example, hierarchy of type when you're designing a document and you say, hey, I know a title should be bigger. I know the body copy should be smaller, et cetera, et cetera. How much there's a lot of nuance there. And the challenge for us working in the presentation realm is when you say, hey, this presentation has to work in a boardroom that has 12 people sitting in it, watching it on a TV. And then you find out they're going to use that same presentation at an event with 1,000 people and a 20-foot wide screen a week later. And so a lot of the things that you don't normally consider, because you're in these buckets, we have to, in the presentation world, we have to know a little bit about web design, in the sense that you're usually working with tools that are going to need to be browser safe, or colors that'll be browser safe or projector safe. We have to know a little bit about user experience design and user interface design, because often you're designing a presentation that you give to a client, and then they actually are going to go in and edit it. So that's one thing that I don't think a lot of people understand, is if you're a document publishing layout designer, very often you get to own that document with your team. You might get red pen markup from a client, but you inevitably get to make those changes. We don't. A lot of the time we design something, we give it to our client, and then they, how do I politely say, adjust it after the fact. And so we have to have a sort of a UX UI mindset about how we build things, because we know they're going to get to pick up the hood and see how the engine was built. So it's not just enough to make it look good. You have to build it the right way. And now with the advent of mobile being so huge, one of our clients the other day was talking to us about how we've built their sales enablement presentations for years. And now their entire sales force, which is 5,000 people worldwide managing accounts, they're giving their presentations using their tablet or their phone in person with a client when they get them for 4 minutes walking down a hallway. And so we have to think about mobile applications now, and how we can get our presentations into mobile. And so that's a big part of the presentation world, is we don't get to have exclusivity like a video or a MoGraph person will, or a print designer will. But we have some advantages, right? We don't have to use code. We don't have to learn code. We don't have to do any development to get it onto a mobile tool. So we kind of get the best of both worlds, but with the utmost collaboration with the client. That's tricky.
So we happen to be streaming live on the InDesign Facebook page.
Yeah.
So that's probably for a reason. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, for sure. So, now InDesign, for the last couple of versions, I think people are becoming more and more aware of, it's not just a print layout tool anymore, right? So you've got all of these applications with InDesign that are really growing. So we saw people getting into more interactive media. There were very dynamic kind of magazines on iPad and things that were being created for a while. I think of some of the work people like Chris Converse have been doing for years. And now you start getting into this world of presentations. And so interestingly, in InDesign, they've added a lot of features to support the idea of building presentations. And so I think that's, why we're together today, is to kind of look at some of those features and where they are. So yeah, it's there's some advantages here. And then the one that's the most exciting to me is the reach. We talked about that collaboration. Now with Adobe's Publish Online, the solution to be able to do a presentation for 4,000 people in the field isn't that hard anymore.
All right. So I think people are here would rather see than listen.
Yeah,
so
sure.
I'm going to let you dive in and take us through it.
Yeah, sure. Okay, cool. Well, I'm going to switch over to my screen then, if the interweb gods favor me. Let's see if I can push this fancy button right here and say share screen. Yep, and let's share that one. All right, so you guys should be seeing my screen now.
We do.
Excellent. All right, so I'm going to go over there. So right out of the gate, if we're just talking about InDesign, and kind of some of the things that Adobe have done, presentation design doesn't normally get its own category, or it doesn't get recognized, but the team over there have actually added, if I go File New and just choose a new document, I want to show you guys where they've hidden some things in here, which is pretty cool. if you were to actually go into where you would have your new document options right across the ribbon up here, there's some templates that are always added down in the bottom. But what you don't see up here is presentations. But if you actually go over to web, you'll see that the first options you get under web are infographic presentation, neon presentation, abstract storyboard. There's actually a lot of presentation templates that are built into here. We've got interactive pitch presentation, dark presentation. It just continues and continues. Pitch layouts, a pitch deck or just the term deck alone literally comes from the presentation world when we used to put 35 millimeter slides in a round deck. So, right out of the gate, you can go in here and find some really, really well-built, elaborate presentation templates. Now, to the point that Terry was making earlier, a good presentation shouldn't be something where people have to read a lot. It shouldn't look like a document. So, be careful in the ones that you choose if it looks too much like a document. But this is a great place to start and seeing some of the features because it has some interactivity already built in. It's got some styles built in, etc. Right out of the gate, though, a little housekeeping I think would probably be a good place to start. So let me just go back over here for a second, and actually we'll cheat and we'll use print because I want to talk about what are the default sizes that we normally would use for building out a presentation. So typically in our world, we have two aspect ratios that work for projectors. We have what's either the 4:3 aspect ratio, or we have the more common today 16:9 aspect ratio. Interestingly, when a lot of people first get into the presentation world, they approach that as if they're designing a web page and they start working in pixels, and we typically don't. We actually normally work in inches just because of the way that things scale with our projectors, and often we have to take these presentations and use them as leave behinds. So we have to be able to look at the scale in regards to print. That's kind of our foundation. So a traditional presentation for us would be 13.333 inches by 7.5 inches. Oops, not 70. That'd be too big. So 7.5 inches. And a couple other things that you need to be aware of when you're building out your presentations in InDesign. So you can set your number of pages or add them later. That's no big deal. But the big one here, and this is the really important one, is facing pages that are right here. Okay, we don't ever want to use this when we create our document. And the reason for that is the way that a lot of PDF readers and other playback formats work. It'll actually try to show two of those pages together at the same time. So if you imagine as a presenter, you're trying to show some content, you really don't want that to have two slides up at the same time. So that's just a little bit of housekeeping if you're going to start building out your own templates. Let's go ahead and hit create for a second. We'll go to the second part of housekeeping. So the second part here that I want to make sure everyone's aware of is when you're working with hardware like projectors or TV displays or mobile devices, typically we think of InDesign as a print document layout tool. But for what we do, we're typically working with, again, projectors, TVs, and mobile devices. So one of the things that we also need to make sure of is that when we're working on a document, if we go into our color settings, which is just edit color settings here, hopefully that's showing up for you guys.
Yep, we can see it. You can zoom in when you need to.
Okay, perfect. So one of the big things here is we want to make sure that our working space is set to sRGB right here. So that sRGB is going to be key to making sure that we have consistent color, right? And so the cool thing about that is most of the time, if we're building print documents in InDesign, we're going to let the printer manage the color conversion anyway. But the sRGB is that reduced gamut. And so when we make graphics in sRGB and we're transferring from Photoshop over, we know that if it's going to go to a projector, whether that's a projector from Epson or one of the big boys out there, they actually profile most of their lamps to have an sRGB mode by default. So that's another really, really big thing. If you want your graphics to be consistent when they're showing that presentation from InDesign on a TV or on that big screen in the projection room, this is the way to assure some of that quality. If you don't do that, you'll probably get an email a little bit later in the week saying, hey, my blues all turned purple. What happened? And then I know you've been working in CMYK. So a little bit of housekeeping there. Okay, so let's look at one of those templates that I actually pulled down earlier. And so just right out of the gate here, let me move this over. You can see the template that Adobe has provided has a lot of options in it. And most of the time when people think about a good presentation system, what they want is slides, right? They want lots and lots of slides, just as many layouts as you can give them that they can manipulate and they can control. But in fact, what makes a really good presentation be modular from that UX UI sort of experience is how systematically was it built. And if we think about having systematic controls, this is where InDesign blows away all of the other industry standard tools for presentations, because in a tool like PowerPoint, for example, we can only have two particular font themes. We can have a body font and we can have a header font, and that's what we're limited to. We can have 9 levels of formatting of those two fonts, but that's it. That's all we can do inside of PowerPoint or Keynote. We're literally limitless inside of InDesign. So for example, if we look at the paragraph styles that came with this template, you can see that they've got different title formatting, body text formatting, formatting for tables and grids, footers, etc. And there's some distinct advantages, and I'll show those in a second, from having paragraph styles versus also having character styles, which is another thing that we can't really do inside of traditional presentation tools. So lots of things that we can control here. And I'll show you guys an example of what I'm talking about. Let me jump over there real quick. Let's see, where did it go? Okay, so here's a good example. So this might be just kind of an opening slide from an event. And if you look at the slide content that's in here right now, if I highlight a piece of this text, you can see in my paragraph style area, it says body first. That's the paragraph style that we're using here. And brief shout out to the queen of InDesign, Anne-Marie Concepcion, created these paragraph styles. She's a genius. Now, let's say that you wanted to have something that was like a bold and a highlight that you could use throughout your deck. Well, one of the things that we know with paragraph styles and character styles is any text that we use that style with throughout all of the slides, if you adjust the style, it updates everything throughout the deck. And that's a huge part of that systematic control because, again, I don't know if you guys are aware of this, clients sometimes change their minds. Just occasionally. So here's like a little trick that we can't do inside of a tool like PowerPoint. The paragraph style is kind of the overarching controller of formatting. Our character styles over here allows us to apply a format inside of text that has a paragraph style applied to it. So for example, if I wanted to go in here and create like a bold call out that we use throughout the deck, okay, I could go in here and say, let's go ahead, and I have nothing selected right now. Let's go in here and say, make a new character style. And we'll name this bold highlight. Okay. And I don't have anything selected, but if I go into my basic character formats, at the very least, I can tell my style to be bold. And I can go into my character color and I could choose any color that I want in here to make the accent. So let's use the red one here. Okay, and we'll hit OK. Somebody out in the audience right now is going to be going, I would never use red for a highlight. How dare you? Okay. Now, the cool thing here is if we have a word and we highlight this with that bold highlight, okay, you can see there, if I zoom in, it got made bold. And it's also red, which is great, right? In traditional presentation tools, if you reset the page master, which would be the slide master for us, that goes away. Any formatting you have at the surface level always gets overwritten by the presentation master. So if I have a client that comes back and says, hey, I want to change the font on all of this body formatting, right? And that's the paragraph style. Well, I can go over here and see what that body first paragraph style is. I'll just double click on it. If I go to my basic character formats, I can see that it's Myriad Pro. Most presentations are usually built with Arial unless they have some kind of signature font that they want to use. But when I press OK, all of that body first paragraph style is now switched to Arial, but it has kept that character style as bold with that color. So because I had nothing selected when I chose it, no font was applied. So it will always retain that next level formatting. We can't do that in traditional presentation tools. So if I have a really large sales deck that I'm working on, this is key for me being able to have that efficiency and make global edits, systematic edits throughout the entire document. And I should probably here just segue for a second over to Acrobat, and I'll show you guys what I mean as far as kind of a what is a presentation, I guess is a better way to start here. So let me just go back up to our first page. Terry mentioned earlier that we've all sat through the really bad presentation before. The cool thing about designing presentations with InDesign now is that we have this option to be able to have them read on mobile devices or in various places throughout the world, throughout the industry, right? And the signature key part to that is PDF. There's pretty much a PDF reader of some capacity available on every device out there in the world. And the cool thing is they all have the ability to go into some kind of full screen mode. So in here, we've got Command L as the full screen mode. And so this is just a basic presentation system, just a couple of slides pulled out of that presentation system that we've built for another client. So if I click through here, you've got your typical title slide, your quote slide, your graphic or your mission slide, expanding out on that. But for us, building a presentation means a very visual experience. As you click through a system like this, though, you'll notice certain consistencies, the same colors being used, the same bullet formatting being used, the same type treatment being used, the same layouts and grids, the same object styles. These are things that we can manage at a really macro granular level inside of InDesign. Now, the other thing that is really, really sweet about InDesign that we can't do with Keynote or PowerPoint is we can literally copy and paste vectors in from Illustrator and have them be editable. We can't do that with any of the traditional presentation tools today. In fact, the Adobe team was surprised. They have a feature in Illustrator that says save from Microsoft Office. And I told them it was useless. Nobody in the presentation world uses it because it makes a PNG and we all want editable vectors inside our presentations. And they said, wait a minute, you use Illustrator with PowerPoint? So there was a bit of an awareness moment there. But now that we're starting to use InDesign for a lot of these types of presentations, all of those problems have gone away. So let me just get past this last couple slides here. So now I know that with the traditional tool that we're using, because we can export to PDF, we have one option there for a delivery mechanism of a presentation. Now, what if you just had a living document and you were working inside of InDesign, right?
Wait, folks, here it comes. This is why you're watching this. This is that moment where the light's about to go on. Take it away.
Right? And I'm gonna pick on Adobe for a second though, Terry, because the quick key they chose for this has screwed me up so many times.
That's not my fault. Continue.
I know it's not your fault. It's not your fault. So if you wanted to actually be able to see this in presentation mode, right? You can go under View, you can go to Screen Mode, and then down here at the bottom of the list, the quick key is Shift W. Don't press Command W like I have a few hundred times, because that'll close your file. So Shift W will launch this into a full screen presentation from within InDesign. So that means
you mean InDesign has the ability to present Slides
Yeah.
or an InDesign document, just like PowerPoint and Keynote?
Exactly like PowerPoint and Keynote. So now our deck is up. This is still our editable file. And I can even use my cursors to go left and right to control my navigation as I go through. So here we are. We're just clicking through just like you would a traditional presentation using this template that we got from Adobe. And I will say how impressed I was. I downloaded this template earlier just to kind of play with it. And immediately it said, hey, this template is missing fonts. Would you like to activate them? And because Adobe made that announcement at Max about how many more fonts we can have, it didn't bug me at all about, do I want to turn any of my other fonts off or any of that? It just literally activated them and the template worked perfectly. So big shout out for the type team, the Adobe font team, enabling that. So yeah, so here we are. We're clicking through our presentation. And it's from right here. And that same level of consistency and formatting at a hyper granular level is available because someone spent the time to build this out right and include all of these paragraph styles and character styles at the same time over here. Now, that's the second way, right? So the first way, hey, if my client out in the field doesn't have InDesign, what do? Well, I send them a PDF. If it's something that I'm personally presenting as someone that works with a lot of our InDesign materials, then I'm going to present from right here in InDesign, and I'm going to adjust my layouts and make it so that it suits the media in the sizes that I mentioned earlier. The third part that I think is really, really key is understanding how you can also be the keeper, the gatekeeper of a presentation. So very often we're asked to maintain and design a presentation that could be distributed worldwide, but they don't want to let the people out in the field be able to edit it. They don't want to give them the free reign of the content. And so this is where publish online has become such a key element, right? So if I zoom in, just up here in the top right of our screen, we have the publish online button. And what's cool about this is you build your presentation out, hit publish online, and now it's going to give me a prompt. Now I've published this one earlier, but when you publish it in here, you can say publish it as a new document. Let me see if I can zoom in here. Or update an existing document. And this is the key thing for us as presentation designers, because if we get changes from leadership or from a client, and there's all these people out in the field, what's easier? Emailing 4,000 people and telling them to change slide 3, or telling me as the production person to change slide 3 and then repost it to the web? So I could go in here and make a change to a color, anything at all, choose update existing document. Okay, let me zoom back out here. Go ahead and hit publish, and it maintains the integrity of the original link. So if I hit OK, we'll let that do its thing. The good thing is here at my office, I have Google Fiber. I'm averaging about 976 megs per second upload. So this should
Show
be,
off.
yeah, I am spoiled rotten. I am trying to stream at the same time as doing this, so it's probably not my wisest decision.
I do it all the time. It should be fine.
Yeah. I suspect streaming would fail before the Adobe upload would. So here we get our little preview. It says it's uploading our document. And then just from the format of, okay, so does this mean that when they have this out in the field, they're going to have this clunky browser presentation? Not necessarily, because one of the cool things that they upgraded, and let me drag this over for you to see it. Okay, so I'm going to bring my browser window over. In the past, that was true. If we published online, we kind of had this hokey browser window and everything here. But what they've done, and I love this because it means they truly were thinking about presentation design, is we've actually got a slide sorter view now where we can see a tray down here with our up and coming slides. We also have the ability here to go into full screen mode. And you can share it, publish it, flag it, do all kinds of things. But the full screen mode means it will take advantage of whatever full screen controls that browser has and actually let you navigate with a right click and left click and go through those slides again like a traditional presentation. Let me escape out of there.
Very cool.
So now you're talking about all of the delivery mechanisms that support and serve what would have been traditional audiences of the presentation world. The shortcomings that we're still having is InDesign is still growing in its ability to handle things like transitions, handle things like animations. And transitions are a big one. So I want to mention that briefly. Inside of InDesign, we actually do have some of those traditional types of controls for a presentation. For example, if I go to layout and pages, you can see down here at the bottom of the list again, it says page transitions. And you can choose new ones, you can edit, you can clear all. If I go to choose real quick, and let me just zoom back out. Now, I'm going to pick on Adobe again for a second. The default always comes up as blinds, which is only second to the worst transition ever in history, which is dissolve. Nobody uses blinds, and if they do, yes, we'll go with that. So,
All right,
what's the most
I have an excuse.
okay?
It's on blind, so you'll change it.
It's on blinds. Nice.
So you'll change it.
Yeah. I bet people don't.
I tried. That was my best response. That
That was a
it.
good shot. That was a good save. You deserve a brownie point for that. So, the default that most people use is fade, or they use push. That's typically it. But an interesting thing that you'll see down here is like page turn, right? Which says Swift only. And this is my only word of caution to people about using some of the animation and transition tools. You need to test it, because some of these will only work in fixed EPUB type PDFs, or will only work in publish online environments. And that's mostly the transitions. And then animations may only work if they actually have a Swift player installed on their machine. So for us, we're not using this too much yet, because we're waiting for there to be a development in tools to help with that. Now, there are some people out there in the field, and I don't know if I can do a shameless plug here, but there is
You can.
there's a company called Ajar Productions, and it's run by a guy called Justin, and he's got this tool called In5, and he actually has some interactivity that allows you to do some things, and it's called presentation mode as well. And he's got custom slide transitions, and he has some animations, and the whole thing exports as HTML5. So it's not quite as seamless as, say, publish online, but it allows you to have an HTML version of your deck, and then you could host that on your client's ISP, right, their web host, and deliver from there and have HTML5 animations. So we're starting to see more and more options support us with InDesign and presentation world coming together. So yeah, it's pretty fun diving into this, because we're getting controls we've just never had before. If people wanted to learn more about the animations, they could actually go into object and come down to interactive. Wait, I'm in the wrong place. Where am I going? I went to the wrong spot.
You can also switch to your interactive workspace.
Oh, yeah. Do. Interactive for PDF.
Yeah, or no, actually, digital publishing. Do that one.
Digital publishing?
Yeah, that's the better one. That'll give you everything in one spot.
Yeah, there you go. So yeah, over here we've got our animation panel. And so if you were to select an object like this text box, you could go in here and use one of the presets and choose something like a fade in, fade out, fly up from bottom. So these are very, very similar to what we see in traditional presentation tools. But again, you need to make sure you understand where the presentation is going to be played and how it's going to be played.
Right. I think for the most part, those are all safe now for use on Publish Online.
They are, yeah. I think the last time we tested it was a couple weeks back, and almost all of these in the parent category work with Publish Online. They don't all work in PDF environments. But again, you don't want to build presentations that have a lot of distracting media. You really want to use them kind of tastefully. So even though we probably produce about 20,000 slides a year for clients. I would say 80% of it is fade ins and fade outs.
If that.
Yeah, if that, right? So,
Yeah, because
um,
the presentation should be about you, not about,
yeah,
the magic on the screen going from one slide to another. That's actually distracting more than it is helpful.
that's exactly right. Yeah. And, things that you can get into a lot of deep dive here about what makes a good presentation, but, understanding what we call headroom. And headroom means if someone's going to stand in front of the presentation, are they actually blocking the designs and the content you need people to read? So we have to understand where people are going to move. The event team at Adobe and I were talking about the Adobe Max presentations, and how much they have to consider about the angles and people walking on stage and what fits above a person. It's really kind of a fascinating world of for design media. At least it is to me. I'm a big nerd for this stuff.
All right, I'm going to give a shout out because I see him in the chat. Justin's in the chat answering questions and providing links.
Justin, you rock.
Yeah, he's in the Facebook chat for those of you who are not watching on Facebook.
Mr. Justin Putney. Yeah, we did a presentation together at Creative Pro Week in New Orleans, and he walked everybody through some of the new tools that he's building for N5, and it's just mind blowing, like how well you can add stuff to InDesign now. It's really cool. And so, outside of that, I guess the last part I wanted to show, depending on fundamentals here that people want to understand if you're into this kind of thing. First and foremost, what are the most common slide types you're going to need? I see a lot of people downloading templates, and I look at them and go, that's really pretty. You've never built a presentation because they just don't do a lot with clients that are actually using this type of media. So really common slide types, right? Basic parent title, body slide types. Every presentation should have a 2-column slide type. Every single presentation template should have a 3-row format. It should have a title only format where you don't actually have to delete stuff from the body area of the slide. You definitely want to always have at least a big picture plus copy. You always want to have at least a big picture slide. And then you want to have what I call the story collage, where you have copy and multiple images for the story. And so we actually start this way. We built a wireframe template in InDesign, which is what you're seeing right now. And then the cool thing is every time we need to start a new system for a client, about 50% of the work's already done, because now we can just change the character styles and paragraph styles to their font, their brand colors. And it's built out for us, right? If they want a different format for pictures, we change the placeholders. But all that root foundation work has been set up. So this is sort of the advantage that InDesign affords us, being able to, it's a bit like being in a kitchen, right? Like we're pre-making the ingredients and then we're flavoring it to the client's need once we get that material from them.
Very cool.
Yeah, so there's that. And then I was going to show one trick, well, not really a trick, but just a consideration that I would show here. Because we're building presentations, and Terry said earlier, we've all built really bad presentations and we've all sat through really bad
I have
presentations.
abused more keynote transitions than anyone in the audience.
Have you used the fire or the sparkle one?
Of course. I am recovering a recovering transition user, X transition user. I've learned my lessons. I don't do any of that stuff anymore.
That's funny. Yeah, we used to, you've seen in like factories and warehouses, they'll have that sign up that says it's been 16 days since someone was injured in the plant. We used to have one in our office that says it's been 17 days since a bad transition was used. So the last thing I wanted to show is, we talk about building presentations with
one last thing is just like back in the day when we had when multiple fonts became a thing. Mm-hmm. Hey, we got 200 fonts. Let's use them all.
Well, I'll tell you the font horror story because I live in Austin, Texas. We have a district in this city, and it's a pretty nice area. It's got some nice restaurants. It's a nice walking area. It's in downtown. But somebody had the genius to take all the street signs in this like 6-block area and decided that the street signs, first and foremost, are all done with papyrus.
Lovely.
They bolded the papyrus. They cut the street names out of like brass So the letters themselves are negative, they're a hole. And then they put a bright, glowing Microsoft Blue LED behind them. So if you can imagine the train wreck that is a
That's
neon
like an
blue
act
extra
of
bolded.
terrorism.
Yeah. I tell people all the time, and you can find it online. People have written blog posts about how bad Austin was with their papyrus street signs. It's pretty funny. So, the last thing that I was going to mention was just approaching that convenience when you're building presentations. And this is about, to your point, Terry, the more graphical kind of rich approach to building a presentation versus just doing bullet slides. So, for example, we have a client that is one of the larger wine and spirits distributors in the world, which I can tell you has its perks.
Nice.
So here's a typical asset that I've built out for them, right? But what we've done is we've separated this so that the product with its lighting and its shading is all in its own group folder. Mm-hmm. And then we've got the background as its own layer. And the trick here is using CC libraries, which I can't preach enough about how much I love them, because we can't do this with traditional presentation tools. The suite being symbiotic is the key to our efficiency. So one of the tricks that you can do here when you've done all your production work, if I just click on this layer group, down here in the bottom of the CC library, there's this little plus symbol. And I have a ton of layers inside that group. But if I just zoom in down here, you see it says add content. When you click on this, you can choose to add graphic. Okay. And even though there's tons of layers inside that group, it actually places it as a single layered PS file, Photoshop file, with the transparency intact. Which means when I'm over in my presentation space, now I've already dragged in the background photo, but I can go to my library and here's that PS file. I can literally just drag this over, click and drag where I want this to be. There's my product on the table surface. Now, if I crop this, he says, the cool thing here is if I want to do call outs or anything that maybe would traditionally be bullet points, right? I could think about doing things like having a ribbon going across the back here, and this might be my big power statement for the presentation. Let's just fill this in with some kind of color here real quick. Okay. Now I can grab that product and bring it to the front. So now if you think about a graphic-oriented presentation, I could have this carry over onto my clean slides where legibility is a concern when you have a photo in the background. So I could simply grab that product and grab that ribbon. Grab those two. Give me that back. All right, grab the product. Copy it, go to the next page, paste that in place. Grab my other product, copy it, come down my page, paste that in place. Right, and now I've got a clean slide where I could put much more text on the bottom to have that high contrast legibility. But when someone's clicking through this, we're trying to avoid what's called jumping, where you don't want things slide to slide look like they're moving a couple of pixels. Now, I said earlier, what happens if the client changes their mind? Well, the cool thing is this background graphic that we've got here, right? Let me just get rid of this ribbon for a second. If I don't like that anymore, and maybe I've downloaded something for a different theme, then I can drag that in and add it. So we're very often trying to find ways to not build the design in a way that means I have to go back to Photoshop to get it, right? So now I've got this other graphic in here. Boom, now it's sitting in that scene. So the product and the shadows are all living with that particular asset from libraries, and I can move things through.
And I see now that even your wooden shelf is separated. I thought it was part of that other photo.
Right. So yeah, we've got all the elements. Now, as we start getting into animations, that ribbon that we talked about earlier, now you start thinking about, I can have that wipe from left to right. I can have the product float down. The shadow can slowly appear as it floats down. These are all of the things that we can do as the animation capability increases with this tool. And now you get into that, oh, and I can publish it online. Cool, right? I can't do that way with that level of integration between our tools with PowerPoint or Keynote. So for me, there's a right time to use InDesign. There's a wrong time to use InDesign. But if you're getting to own all of the content, if you're getting to be the gatekeeper and you have existing materials to work with from your Marcom department or some form of collateral, InDesign's a really, really great tool for this. And I see it growing in the future as people give this feedback to Adobe.
Great. All right. Well, let's wrap things up. We got some questions on the board here.
Yeah, cool. Let me
switch back to your camera.
Yeah, let's go. Okay, there we go.
And lights off.
Where did my sunlight go? Were we talking that long? Hold on. I'm going to fix this.
All right. All right. So
they're going to speak about 2 minutes per slide. And some aren't, right? You're going to have your title slide, your transition slide, your quote slide, your thank you slide. Those are 3 seconds a piece. But then when they get to what Nancy Duarte refers to as the star slide, something they'll always remember. And so we find that when you're building on a deck, the average to use is about 2 minutes a slide. Now, my average presentation, sales presentations, where they've got 10 minutes in a room with a client, they're maybe 10 slides, 12 slides.
Okay. But
we might have to build 40 of them, 40 of those decks.
And Justin brought up a good point, or he's actually posting, I think, a link to an article about how interactive PDF is dead.
Yeah.
And this is
I have to make a second version for mobile. I have to make another version for tablet. I have to, so on and so forth. As we're seeing InDesign do these liquid layouts and other types of reflow options, nobody else in the game is doing that. PowerPoint doesn't do that. Keynote doesn't do that. So now there's another, stake there in the sand to say, oh, that's something I got to watch, because if I can build one deck and have 90% of the work reflow into another aspect ratio, that saves my team a ton of time. And from a business standpoint, that drives my profit margin. Anytime I can find efficiency, that's a gain for my business. Right. So I'm excited about stuff like that.
Yeah, and that's another reason why, and you showed it earlier, why Publish Online is a much better solution.
Mm-hmm.
Because it is HTML. It can be read on mobile devices. It can be looked at on just about anything. And Absolutely. It will support those interactions, those animations and things that you do in InDesign. So that's what, if you were looking for what's the replacement to interactive PDF, go check out Publish Online.
Absolutely.
And with that, we are way over our time. We're way out of time. But that's okay. I knew this would happen.
I was trying.
No. It was worth it. Didn't want to cut off the good content. So with that said, and I think I covered all the questions that I could see. Mark, they can find you at Life by Pixels on Twitter and Instagram and...
Yep, I'm very active on all social media at Life by Pixels, and if they want to really maintain the conversation with me, we have a Facebook page, which is Life by Pixels, and I post videos and tips and tricks there. I share content from the wonderful Terry White and other people out in the field on that page, so they can always continue the conversation there.
Right. Oh, by the way, I did see a question earlier on, and it was dealing with your first paragraph style. Someone wanted more information about that. And I couldn't tell if you just wanted to know how to do style sheets or specifically that one style. But if you wanted to know how to do style sheets, since I've gotten that request a few times, I'm going to make that one of the upcoming Tuesday streams where I just show style sheets, how to create paragraph styles, character styles, object styles, just styles, and styles.
And importing them from existing
documents.
I've had clients that have letter size print docs, catalogs that have styles created, and I just import them to the presentation and I get all of that consistency.
Boom. There you go. All right. So with that said, cheers, everyone. Thanks for watching, and we will catch you on the next one. We're going to say goodbye.
See you guys next time.
All right.
Thanks, Terry.
All right. Thanks. Thanks, Mark.
Bye.
Appreciate it. Bye.